Hey everybody, this is DJ.
And Chris.
Welcome to the Lot1 Podcast. On today's episode, we talk with Sean Conroy about the writer's room, pilots, working on Mr. Pickles, Key and Peele, and a lot more. Let's get into the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. We have Sean Conroy on today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very flattered, so I appreciate you having me on.
Of course.
Absolutely.
For people at home who don't know who you are yet, can you give us a little backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much, but most of my story is backstory at this point, up till this moment. But short version is I started doing improv when I first moved to New York out of school. Well, I wanted to be an actor, which I've heard is something a lot of people want to do, maybe some of them on this podcast. And I figured out pretty quickly that improv was the thing I loved. Started doing that, started touring the country with an off-Broadway show that did improv, got involved with the Upright Citizens Brigade, did all sorts of comedy. I was doing improv, I was doing sketch stuff. I started doing stand-up. I wrote a one-man show. All of those were amazing. I made a short film where I just used footage from Casablanca and I voiced over it, so it became like a 2-minute film called Rick's Birthday. So all the Nazis were just singing "Happy Birthday" to Rick. and that actually somebody showed that at a show they had. They this guy hosted a show and he was like, "Can I show your short?" So they showed it, and the next day I got a call from somebody who said, I'm out in Los Angeles. I'm somebody's assistant. He saw your short last night. He wants to take you to lunch. And I was like, yes, I like lunch. So I went to lunch with this guy, and it turned out he was an agent at one of the big agencies out here. And he said, you could do well if you moved to LA and wrote for TV. And it took me about a year because I had to, break up with somebody and pack, but I eventually moved to LA, and I had started taking I took a couple of writing classes, and I had started writing sitcom scripts by then. I had written about 6 or 7 episodes of, back then you wrote spec scripts, you wrote for existing shows. So I wrote some episodes of like Friends, Frasier, the Drew Carey Show. When I literally right after I got to LA, a friend of mine called me and said, I just sold a pilot to UPN. Do you want to come in and work on the pilot? And I didn't really know what that meant, but I was like, sure, I'll come in and work on your pilot. And I worked on that pilot, and eventually I got hired to write on that show. And that was kind of the beginning of my writing career. That's the short version. The long version is like 45 minutes. And I feel like if you guys want to hear that, we should do it another time.
Got it. Okay. Oh, so you weren't going to go into that now.
No.
What was the show on UPN?
The show was called Love Inc. And it lasted 1 season. It was canceled at the end of the first season, as was the network. It was the year that the network was combined with combined with the WB to make the CW.
Got it.
Yeah. But Love Inc. starred Busy Phillips and Holly Robinson Pete. And it was about like a dating service. Like, you go into this service and you go, I need a date. And they're like, we'll be your wingman. We'll go with you and we'll plan it out. So nice. That was the premise of the show. That's awesome. And it was great. I got to be in a writer's room on a sitcom for a year. It was like going to graduate school, It was really, really
That's
great.
Really awesome.
Experience over education, right?
Yes.
In this context.
If only I had known. I had somebody tell me, a friend of my father's she was a teacher when he started teaching, and she was like a yoga hippie before that was a thing that people did. And she said to me, senior year of high school, she was like, get a job or travel. Don't go to school, because then when you do go to school, you'll be ready for it. And I didn't listen to her. And looking back, it would have been a good idea,
Yeah. I have a quick question about sort of just because you do some script consulting, right?
Yes.
What does the role of a script consultant look like?
I'm sure it's different for everybody because everybody has different stuff they pay attention to and strengths and weaknesses. For me, when I consult on somebody's script, I'm doing a couple things. Number one, because I do it with mostly sitcom pilots, things that we've never seen before, and chances are good that they're never going to get seen by anybody. Like, in other words, when you write a sitcom pilot, you're doing that to sell yourself, not necessarily to sell the show, unless you're already an established writer, in which case you're getting paid to do it. But when I read somebody's script, I'm looking at a bunch of stuff. I'm looking at, is this an interesting world presented in an interesting way? Are the characters fun and well defined and defined in different ways from each other? Is the story compelling and surprising? And do the jokes make me laugh? And if any of those things aren't true, is there a way that I can help this person focus on that and make it better? You know, that's kind of the thing I try to do with people, you know.
From your first show, because I feel like there's a gap there, from getting on to Love Inc. to script consulting, what was that journey, and how'd you end up going, hey, I should consult for this?
Yeah, so I worked on that show, and you know, like I said, it was like graduate school. Like, I went in there and I learned so much about story and how things work. I already knew, I mean, look, this is just me saying this, but I already knew funny. Okay, guys, let's be honest. I had done a lot of stuff by then. Yeah. I had done a lot of stuff by then. You know, I had done stand up on TV and whatever, but I had not ever been in a situation where I had to really define a story. And so I learned how to do that first year. And then I worked on a bunch of other things. I worked on a show for Spike, another network that got canceled. That was it was a sitcom, but it was kind of improvised. So we wrote outlines for it, not necessarily full scripts. I worked on a sketch show called Key and Peele, which is the one that everybody is familiar with. I worked on a sort of,
Part of it.
I don't know what you call it, like a fake. It wasn't really, I guess it was kind of a mockumentary, but with real people as well, called Dog Bites Man. So they were like a news team that went around and reported on things. So I wrote for that show. And then ultimately, I got hired to be the head writer of a show called Mr. Pickles on Adult Swim. And I did that for 4 seasons. And, you know, that was like not just writing the scripts, but running the show. So it was like the next level of all that and making decisions for everybody, not just for myself. So I feel like, having been through that, I'm okay with going, here's what's good, here's what's not good, because that was my job, you know, for that 4 seasons. And then I ran another show for a season called Gentlemen Lobsters, which was on CISO, yet another canceled network. So
What's going on, man?
Correlation is not causation. Okay.
Okay.
So what's the difference between, I know you kind of mentioned it briefly, but what is some of the key differences between being a staff writer and being the head writer on a show?
I mean, yeah, there's a couple things. One is, if you're a staff writer, you're not really responsible for anything except pitching ideas in the room. So you sit in the room and you go, what if it's this? What if it's this? What if it's this? If you're the head writer, you're the one who says, yes, let's do that thing that this person just said. Let's go in this direction and see where it goes. And then there's also all kinds of stuff with production and scheduling and getting through the episodes and deciding which thing you're going to work on at what time. So there's lots of other responsibilities to it. So I enjoyed very much being the head writer, but I also, being a staff writer is just, you get to go in and have fun, you know, which is nice.
That sounds pretty fun, actually.
Yeah, just going into a room with a bunch of funny people and trying to make each other laugh about stuff is delightful. And people, I mean, no offense to people who have other jobs, But people who are writers, in my mind, especially comedy writers, tend to be really interesting people, even in just how they think about the world and what they do in real life and all that kind of stuff. So it is fun, you know?
So clarification too, when you're staff in the writer's room, you're not
Mhm.
writing anything. It's the writers who are writing it, but you're helping them get to the idea and writing it, or
Well, I'm sorry. When you're a staff writer, is that what you're asking? When you're a staff writer, how does that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Every
Just
show
more
is
specific
different.
for those who don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, every show is different, but generally speaking, there's a hierarchy of who does what in the writer's room. So, for example, when we were working on Mr. Pickles, and I was head writing, people would pitch all kinds of ideas. We would come up with a very detailed outline. And then one of the people in the room who had been pitching all those ideas, we would give that person the outline after it got approved by the network and the production company. We'd give them the outline and say, okay, you, AG, go write the script. And they would go off for 3 days and come back with the script written. So there's different, and like I said, every room is different, but generally speaking, even on that first show, which was a network sitcom with 11 writers in the room, every writer probably got at least 2 scripts to go work on themselves and then bring back to the room, and the room would go through it and make whatever changes they felt were appropriate, guided by the head writer, you know. Again, we go through the whole script and everybody goes, what if we change this joke to this? And the head writer goes, yes. Or they might say no, or they might say, let's keep pitching on this idea, you know?
Did you find / do you find it's hard to keep consistency of like character and personality, who they are from episode to episode, having so many different writers, like especially maybe more in reference to like a first season versus like a later season when they've been doing it for a while or whatever?
I think that is a difficult thing when you're starting out, is just defining the characters and going, what are their relationships and how do they interact with each other? I've just been working on a pilot with somebody that we're doing for an organization over in Ireland. And, you know, we've been pitching this show for a couple years. And finally somebody was like, here, we'll give you money to write the pilot. And we sat down to write the pilot and we were like, we've been pitching these characters for so long and we still have so much to learn about them. You know, there was somebody, I can never remember. I quote this all the time and I can never remember who said it, but 7 years ago, no, there's a, I think it was Mike Schur said, every sitcom should be able to write and shoot the first 10 episodes and then throw those away and then make the show, because that's really how long it takes you to figure those characters out. Now, once you have them figured out, I don't think it's that difficult to be like, oh, this is what this character would say in this particular situation. You know, one thing I talk about in my classes is like, can we cross out the names of the person who's saying each line and still know who said that line? You know, if you look at a Friends script, you know which line is Joey, which line is Chandler, which line is Phoebe, which line, you know, I could list all the characters. I know all their names. But you know, so I think
were you going to continue to list them?
No.
I'm just joking.
I think I don't actually know all their names. I stopped.
No. So I did have a question. So what are some of the pitfalls when a person is starting out and writing that pilot?
It is extremely difficult. It is way harder than people think it is to write a pilot for a show. I think a lot of people go into writing a pilot and they're like, oh, what's the big deal? But it's so much information packed into such little real estate to get through all the things you have to get through to make it an effective pilot. And it takes a lot of work to figure out how to do that. And I think what people don't realize also, I mean, like I said before I wrote the script that got me my first writing job. So I went in and worked on that pilot for UPN. And then my friend was like, okay, the pilot got picked up. If you want to write for the show, do you have a script that I can submit to the production company and the network so they can see that you can actually write a script? And by then, you know, I had written 6 or 7 episodes of various shows. And so I feel like even though the one I submitted, now I look back at it and I'm like, what a you know, terrible script, but it was the best thing I had at the time, not knowing how to do this stuff. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand is you have to take your time and learn the craft and figure out how to do it. And chances are, unless you get very lucky, chances are you're not going to get hired off your first script or your second script or your third. Like, you just got to keep writing. That's the nature of the game, you know. And I call it a game because it's easy to lose. No.
You know, it's funny. I think a lot of people definitely have, you know, there's a gap in knowledge from what we think the industry is going to be like and what it actually is like. And I think it's helpful for people to understand how long it actually takes to get to those roles. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time.
I'm not saying my
Yeah.
path is typical, but I will say that I had been doing comedy, I think of it as comedy, for 15 years before I got my first TV writing job. I didn't even know that was a thing you could do, really. I mean, you know, again, I was like, oh, I'll be funny, I'll get discovered, I'll be on TV and all that stuff. And then once I started doing the writing stuff, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I love this, you know. I don't know if you guys have done the acting thing but you know what it's like. You just sit around, you do nothing for endless periods of time, you know? And when you're a writer, you have control over what everybody is saying and doing at every moment. So I find it to be so much more fun. And, you know, it's unfortunate that the actors get all the glory and all the money, but, you know, what can you do?
Those damn actors.
When it comes to pilots, especially with you know, the last 5 years, everything's kind of flip flop and thrown into a blender and hit, you know, the frozen banana button and what's happening, right?
Yeah.
I've heard things, I haven't heard things about how pilots are kind of useless now or not really accepted by the streamers, or like you don't really need to do a pilot, or you do. What's your opinion? You're currently working through it. Yeah, what's going on?
Here's what I think. First of all, you know, this is the spiel I always give people, and I'm a huge fan of the word spiel, is if you want to write for television, all you have to do is do exactly what I did. And then I go through a half hour of all the stuff I did over the course of beginning my career. And of course, nobody can duplicate that. So there's no right way to get into the business. Now, I think there's a distinction between what you're saying about how streamers don't want pilots. They don't want pilots for shows they're actually making. They want to pick up a full season of a show. But I think that's different from getting into the business where you have to write a pilot and say, I am capable of doing something this good, and this is what I can bring to your full season of a show that's getting picked up by a streamer. So writing the pilot when you're starting out is to get the job to sell yourself, as opposed to the pilot that used to be the thing that networks bought. And now they've sort of changed the model because, you know, wealth extraction and capitalism and wealth disparity and blah, 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 all that stuff. You know, they don't want to spend money on making 100 pilots when they just make a season and it costs 1/100th of the cost of that. And they recoup money for their shareholders, you know? So I think that's just a different business model.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting to take in that perspective, because the way that I was thinking about it was in terms of like, hey, am not a writer. Do I write? Yes, because I feel like every filmmaker should write, right? But I don't classify myself as a writer. I'm really good at world building. I'm not good at like putting that into dialogue and coherentness, right? So for me as a producer slash director situation, when I'm thinking of pilot, I'm thinking of, oh, do I get a pilot written to then find the funding to make it, then make, like sell it to the streamer, like the old traditional way, versus the way that you're saying, which makes 100% sense for a writer to write a pilot in order to get the job to work on I call them pilot seasons, the first seasons on streaming,
Right.
because they are pilot seasons at this
That
point.
makes sense to use that term. Absolutely. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like your pilot is like your resume when you're looking to get a job for the first time. Once you get the job, you're in the club and you can say, hey, hey, Chris, I worked on this other show. I'd love to work on the show that you have coming up. And then it's up to you to decide whether you want to work with that person or not, but just getting your foot in the door is about having a piece of material that you can show to people and say, this is how good I am,
Do you feel like you have to have a destination in mind when you're deciding to write a pilot? Meaning like, yeah, I think you.
So no. Finish what you're saying, because I think I know what you're saying, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, meaning like, I want to take it to, these producers. I want to take it to this network. Or should you write just to write?
Well, those are two good questions. Well, I think to answer the second one first,
yeah,
you have to write stuff that you care about and are passionate about.
mm-hmm.
I think it's not possible to go, I mean, it is possible, but I don't think it's rewarding to go, I should really write something about what's going on in the world. I should write something about finance, and it should be applicable to big networks because that's where the money is. Like, it should be something that you're like, this is the thing I love, because you're going to be spending so much time with this material trying to make it better and better and better. And if it's not something you're passionate about, it just becomes either a nightmare or trash, like you just don't finish it. So that was the second question. The first question I think is important too, because if you look at various networks and streaming services, you go, okay, shows that are written for HBO stuff are very different from shows that are written for CBS stuff, are also different from shows that are written for Netflix, are different from shows that are written for Disney. Like, and keeping in mind that the chances are so small when you're starting out that you're actually going to sell that pilot to anybody, much less the network you're aiming it at. But if you have in mind, this is the kind of show I would like to do, writing towards that show is going to push you further in that direction, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I've ended up in the animation world, and that was never a thing that I was focused on. It just kind of happened for a variety of reasons. And I love animation. If you had asked me before I got into animation, like, is this the thing you want to end up doing? I would not have said yes. I wouldn't even have known. I would have been like, why are you asking me that? But I think part of that is because I didn't really go, this is the thing I want to do, and I'm going to go for it, So I think that having that kind of focus is helpful from the beginning.
Mm.
What do you feel like the difference is between writing for animation and live action?
Well, I think animation is a place where you can kind of go way farther with how weird or pushed or strange or big things are, Anything is possible in animation if you define the rules of the world correctly. I mean, I don't know. I would not recommend that people watch episodes of Mr. Pickles because it will give you nightmares. But there were so many fun things we did on that show that were super silly, but were allowed in a world like that, could happen in a world like that. I always go back to the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Like anything could happen. People, the explosions, whatever, and it's okay because that's the world they're living in. Live action, there's still shows that kind of push the limits, but you can only push them so far.
Yeah, that makes sense. So going back to Mr. Pickles and Key and Peele, how does one get onto a show like that? Shows like that?
Yeah, that's another really good question, because this is another thing I say all the time is almost every single job I've ever gotten is from somebody I knew from something else. Like networking is so important and such a thing that leads to stuff. And I never really...
The theme of this podcast for sure.
Is it?
It's who you know. Yeah, quite literally. That's always everyone's response.
Yeah.
We already know, but like I think we're trying to find the other response, but we all know know the answer. It's who you know.
I mean, it's you have to be good, you have to have skills, you have to, but there's lots of people with talent, It's like and luck is always a factor. Being in the right place at the right time helps. The fact that like I said, I made that stupid Rick's birthday movie from Casablanca, and that the agent happened to be there that night and saw it and called me and was like, come to LA. And when I moved to LA, he became my agent. And then years later, like 10 years later, he had left agenting and become a producer. And he was like, I have this pilot that these two guys are working on, and they are sketch writers, not sitcom writers. So they're having a little trouble. Will you come in and give them notes on their pilot? And I went in and I gave them a lot of notes on their pilot, and they ignored all my notes. And they made the pilot the way they wanted to make it. And it got picked up. And that show ended up being Mr. Pickles. Adult Swim said, yes, we want to make your show, but we need somebody in the room to run the show. So is there somebody you guys would feel okay working with? So that's how I ended up on Mr. Pickles, was all from that stupid Casablanca thing, and keeping
good.
in touch with that guy over the course of 10 years and working on other projects. But like everything I've done has been because I worked with this person on this thing, and they were like, I have this other thing. Do you want to work on this thing too?
Yeah. So being willing to work on things, put yourself out there, and just connect with as many people as possible.
Yeah, being nice and being kind, and fostering those relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because I've always done well with those things. I haven't. And I look back and I'm like, I could have been better at that stuff. I wish I was better at that stuff. But when it happened, it worked out great,
So I was gonna ask,
I'm
well,
single.
actually, I will ask. Yes, are you single? No. So I was gonna ask, do you have like something that you've sort of learned over the course of those 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
keeping up with people, that, and this is a networking question, that you really felt like was a big factor, like one of the biggest factors in you communicating with people?
Mm-hmm.
From a networking standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's hard to say because I was not conscious of it at the time, but I guess looking back, it for me, I think other people might disagree with my take on this, but like, I think it meant being easy to be around, and B, good at comedy, like somebody has the skills and is also somebody you're not going to be with in a writer's room and 10 minutes later be like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy is sitting across from me and he's going to be across from me 8 to 15 hours a day for the next 9 months or whatever, So I think those are the two biggest factors, at least for, sitcom writing stuff. because you spend an inordinate amount of time with people. And like a lot of people don't necessarily throw the word inordinate out there, but I do, even though it's hard for me to pronounce, you know?
Today's episode is brought to you by Saturation.io. Saturation is a modern, cloud-based budgeting and expense management platform built specifically for filmmakers, producers, and production teams. Designed by industry professionals, it helps streamline financial workflows for films, TV shows, commercials, and so much more. With real-time collaboration features, customizable budget templates, and automated expense tracking, Saturation eliminates the need for clunky spreadsheets and outdated software. It supports seamless imports from tools like Movie Magic and offers powerful insights and controls without that learning curve. So, whether you're managing a small indie film or a multi-million-dollar production, Saturation gives you clarity, accuracy, and control all in one place. With a free tier available and proven for use by producers across all budgets, there has never been a better time to experience the next generation of production finance. Click the link in the description to get started today. All right, let's get back to the show. I kind of want to go back a little bit to script consulting.
Mm-hmm.
When you are sort of getting a new client, what are some of the criteria that you're looking for in order to decide on who to work with?
I'm pretty open to people, you know? I think that there's a lot of stuff I've learned over the course of the last 20 years that I wish I had known early on, or that somebody had been able to tell me. I was lucky. I had a really great sitcom writing teacher who knew a lot and was helpful, but also, you know, I just feel like because I've studied so much and worked so much on these things, I have a way that I really boil it down, and I feel like I'm able to communicate that to anybody, you know? So it's not, if somebody comes to me and says, I've never done this before. I had somebody do this recently. They were like, I've never done this before. I have this other job. I work, and it was somebody with like a pretty decent, impressive job. And she said, I just have always been interested in writing. Will you help me figure out what I want to write? And so we started working together on like developing a show. It wasn't even somebody coming to me with a script. It was starting at the very beginning, because I think for me, I just enjoy every part of the process. You know, one of the things that's really fun for me when I'm working with somebody on a script is just pitching jokes, like coming up with stuff, you know, and letting them decide to use it or not use it. Like I always see my role. This is what I say. I see my role as a creative producer. Like I'm not going to tell you have to do anything, but I'm just going to try to help make good decisions, you know?
I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but if you were going to advise somebody on getting into a writer's room today,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say? Would it really be that possible? Because I know that there's been some contraction with a lot of writing jobs.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is you have to break into the studio lot.
Yeah.
No, I
Crowbar.
I think it is hard. I think it is harder than it used to be, because there has been contraction and there are a lot of people sort of bottlenecked and looking for work. But the flip side of that is there's always a desire for new ideas, new voices, new faces, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to say there's any guarantee, but I think, like with anything else, it's like, if this is what you really want to do, buckle down and do the best you can. And if it doesn't work out, then you try it as hard as you could. I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, no problem, you get into a writer. Like, I look at the people who are like my generation, my age or whatever, and the people who started right when I started doing improv, who started writing for television. Those are the people with $20 million houses in Beverly Hills, because they got in at the right time. Like the 90s was the golden age of writing for television, you know, and things have changed a lot since then. But I also feel like if this is what you want to do, it can't just be because you want to write for television. It has to be because writing is the thing you want to do. And if that's what you want to do, you have to do that. you know, and if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, something else will work out. And at least you've gotten to express yourself and figure out the world in the way that you want to through your writing. Sorry, does that help? No.
No, I would say, yeah, it does.
It does, yeah, for sure. I mean,
I'm not giving the most encouraging positive answer, right? I'm not.
So you're saying go into verticals. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was just talking to, I don't totally understand the vertical thing, but I was just talking to somebody the other day and I was like, what if we did a vertical? And they were like, it's all AI and no one cares about anything. So I was like, I don't know if that interests me anymore.
Verticals is not a place you go when you want good storytelling.
Right.
Let's just put it that way. Right.
30 seconds to a minute, and there has to be a cliffhanger at the end.
I have worked on a couple verticals, and I will tell you, all of them are very dramatic.
Yes.
Very dramatic.
You said traumatic? Yeah.
Traumatic. For me, as a crew member.
Traumatic. I thought you said dramatic.
No, I said dramatic. And Deji's just trying to throw a wrench into the comment.
I've purposely misinterpreted that for my own benefit.
Yeah, so let's move forward. I have a great question for you, Sean.
Boy,
you know,
I'll be the judge of
that. You've launched several podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
When are you going to make a great one? I'm just playing. What are the makings of a great podcast?
I think it's different for whatever you're trying to do. Like, you guys are trying to do a service to people of like, this is what you're going to learn when you come to our show. And I have had a podcast like that, which only lasted one season, which was about being happier. And I feel like I got some great guests and I, got some insight into psychology and the things that we have to, but the first podcast I did, which was called The Long Shot and which lasted almost 15 years. I think it was really great. I mean, obviously I think it was great, but it never got a huge audience or anything like that. But the people who listened to the show were absolutely psychotic about it, because I feel like it was just, it's the thing that everybody's looking for and nobody's really able to find, which is like a hangout podcast where it's just people hanging out and being friends and goofing around. And we found that in a way that I think is very rare. And it was very fun. It was fun for me. I think it was fun for everybody on the show. Everybody had their specific roles. We had the angry comic and the sweet, nice person and the other sweet, nice person and the other angry comic. And it just worked somehow. So that was really fun. But, then I did a sketch podcast that was just all sketches I had written and I did all the voices for. And that lasted one episode because I was like, I cannot do this much work for a half-hour show on a regular basis,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We've gone through metamorphoses here too, as well, of, going through like what's sustainable and what's not sustainable, because similarly, we're in a niche where we're teaching about film, and in the eyes of the masses, film is dying. So it's kind of like, we're going to push forward, but we have to make changes so we can sustain it.
Right.
So I completely understand that. But it's interesting you bring up, for 15 years you did the podcast, because I was reading some of the comments on that podcast. Your fans were really like, oh my God, I love this. This is my whole life for 15 years. Yeah. Which is really cool to see.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you bring up like, a podcast where they're just like talking, or like we're basically friends. It's just people hanging out, and everyone wants that, but no one can find it.
Right.
TikTok, since it has emerged in the last like 3 years now, 4 years, whatever, here in America, there's a lot of podcasts now that are literally just that. They don't actually record like a true, like, here's an episode of the podcast. They predetermine what they're going to talk about. And it's just like two friends talking about that thing. And that's it. That's literally just the podcast. And it's just for bites on TikTok. It's not for like Spotify listens or whatever. They're making all of their money and their fan bases off of the social media bites, where, you know, they're fighting over this movie or fighting over what's the best chocolate or whatever. And it works really well. So maybe you should reconsider that.
Maybe I should. I mean, the problem I have is like, I was about to use a bunch of swear words. I don't care for that stuff. I don't care about it. You know, what I was saying before is something I try to live by, which is like, I want this to be a project about which I am passionate, not a
Sure.
project that I'm like,
Absolutely.
oh, this is gonna get clicks, or this is gonna get money. You know, I look at, I just, obviously everybody knows this, but boy, what damage that stuff has done, both to the entertainment industry and to the world. I heard a term the other day for the first time, and I think it's such a great term. You guys have probably known it for a long time, but conflict entrepreneur, like all these people who push these terrible political narratives because it makes people angry and makes them click and makes them watch and makes them give money. And it just has destroyed so many things.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like with entertainment, it's kind of similar, where, you know, verticals, or what you're talking about, which is like people clipping stuff without even really doing the actual thing. Like, I think what you're saying is you can't go and listen to an hour-long episode of these guys deciding which is the better kind of chocolate. It's more just
it
like,
depends on them. Yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. Yeah.
But, you know, I will have to think about going and repurposing some of the old episodes of The Long Shot.
And this is what I was going to say in the last response to your question that you had, was there is a level of a true successful filmmaker where you have to be in it for the filmmaking. And that is what the tech industry doesn't understand about the film industry. And that's why we're failing right now is, you know, we're all found it, like, I always bring up the Warner Brothers, the literal Warner Brothers, when they founded their studio, the idea that, oh, anywhere on the lot is filmable, because they understand the creative side of it. Now we've gone so far in the heads of these studios that they're all just CEOs. They're not filmmakers. They're not people from the bottom who understand and all that stuff. And so there's a level of, like, you have to be a filmmaker and that level of art, and you have to love the craft in order for you to be sustained. And that's why so many people fail, is they just get burnt on it, or, you know, they get caught up in the if, ands, or buts. Like, you need to make money to sustain yourself and build a family and a life, but like, also what keeps you passionate and what makes good movies are passionate filmmakers making those movies or those shows. That's why there's so much dead like shows. You just don't have passionate people making them that often. I'm not gonna, that's very generalized, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry. That's the box I'll die on, or the hill I'll die on.
No. But I think it, you know, it's that thing. And I fail at this all the time. It's like, control the things you can control and don't worry about the rest. Right. So what can you control? You can't control how much money you're going to make from stuff. You can't control who's going to love your stuff. All you can control is the stuff you make. And if you focus on that, at least you have that. You may not have any of the other stuff. You may not have huge commercial success. You may not have an Oscar. You may not have a roof over your head, but you at least have the thing you made, you know?
Yeah. At least you'll have the Casablanca video,
which you can use to you know, unspool the VHS tape and you can build a roof out of that, you know?
That is true. It'd be very thin. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's feeling more and more, especially because like a lot of the content that we're seeing is transactional in a way. I feel like there's like a lot more things are devoid of, like, not that they're devoid of completely of meaning, but it's just like there is less artistry in some of these things that we're seeing out there.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a weird conversation the other day because I was kind of saying that, like, now everybody talks about how people watch Netflix while they're folding the laundry, or they're looking at their phone, or they're, you know, playing a game at the same time. So nobody cares. Like, in other words, they can make all kinds of stuff that's not good, and it doesn't matter because the algorithm pushes that to the front of the line, and you're like, okay, I'll watch this crap because I'm going to be doing something else the whole time. And to me, I take, this is absurd, but I see it as kind of like you said, it's like an artistic medium. It's a way for people to do beautiful things. Like there's so many shows that I have watched and that I look back at that I'm like, this was amazing. This was an amazing experience to sit through this show and feel the emotions that it brought up and laugh the laughs that it brought up. But, you know, it was a real piece of, I guess, a piece of somebody's brain that they put on the screen in a way that reached me. And I was, of course, having this conversation with somebody who I was like, I just see it as, you know, people don't take it as seriously anymore. And they were like, take it seriously. It's TV. And like, I get that part of it too, you know, where you get a little caught up in the thing you do and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But I really do see it that way. And I feel like you're right that it is kind of changing a little bit, you know, unless people remain passionate and try to put it out there. Like anytime I see a show and I'm like, I can see the creator's brain on the screen. I love it. I love it every time, you know?
I mean, this isn't a show, but it's a trilogy. But I always like to bring up Lord of the Rings. Like you watch the behind the scenes on those videos, every single crew member and actor on those 3 movies was in it 1,000%, and it showed on the screen. And that's what I always like to tell people. It's like, you can tell.
Well, I wasn't going to say what they gave because, you know, not allowed to swear on this podcast.
They gave
a hoot.
They gave a hoot. I got a funny thing. I mean, getting off of a kind of serious kind of thing.
Sorry
I
about
saw
that.
you were an extra voice on Monsters University. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I can talk about that. First of all, that was funny to me because I didn't realize, like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think my name comes up in the credits to that movie. And I say that because when it came out, or I guess when it was on TV, when it was first on TV, which has got to be like 10 years ago or more at this point, my brother called me and he was like, my nephew was watching, you know, my 10-year-old nephew was watching it and saw my name in the credits and was like, oh, Uncle Sean was in that movie. But the truth is, what I did for that was what they call a loop group, which means I went in with a bunch of other people and we did a lot of noises and sounds, and then people would do specific lines. But it was like 6 or 8 of us in a room all at the same time for probably a few hours, just doing whatever they told us. A lot of what a loop group does is background noise, you know, when they're in the stadium in that movie, or Walking Dead, I know has loop groups that do the sound of the zombies when they're in the, and of course the thing that was great about that thing is that it was a union job. So I got paid decently, and then I kept getting residual checks for a while when that would sell through to various platforms. But what that means is that getting into a loop group, that happened through UCB. I don't know how they got to UCB, but they just had us come in one day, about 6 of us. But there are actual, you know, group. It's like being in a gang. Like you're in the gang and nobody else is allowed in the gang, and you have to get beaten into the loop group, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like they're very protective of their turf. So anyway, that's how I was in that thing.
That's great.
Hilarious.
Do you feel like you know, being a writer and also being an actor and doing improv, do you feel like to accompany writing for comedy that doing something else might be helpful as well? Like being in improv or acting or directing things?
I think, well, I can only speak from my own experience, and having done all of those things, they all come in handy when I'm in the room. They are all skills that come into play when I'm in the writer's room. One of the things I used to love on Mr. Pickles, this is so self-centered, but so what? I'm a, whatever. But when we would do, I was the head writer, so I faced the screen. Everybody else sat on either side of the table, and we would read through the script on the screen, and I would just do all the voices and all the narration myself. So I got to do all the character voices and whatever. And like, that's acting, that's comedy, that's trying to get the timing right, that's understanding all that stuff. So it was using my improv skills and my stand-up skills all in a way that helped with the writing of the episode. And sometimes when we were developing characters or developing dialogue, I would just kind of slip into characters and start improvising stuff, because that's a way to get to stuff. And luckily I had, usually one or two other people in the room to say, oh yes, let's keep that, let's not keep that, whatever. So I think having a lot of, I hate this phrase, but like a lot of tools in the tool belt, like the more tools you have, you're wearing a tool belt. And if you only have one tool, what use are you? But if you have a bunch of tools, if you have a bunch of tools, you can fix the roof, you can fix the toilet, whatever you need to do, hang a picture, So anyway, that's my take on it, is like, the more keep grinding, keep learning new things, because it will all be helpful ultimately,
Yeah.
No, I definitely can agree with that. I feel like I've done a lot of different things in film, producing, being an AD, being on the production side of things, being coordinators, things like that. And then also being in front of the camera, acting, although terribly, and then, directing and doing a lot of different jobs. I feel like, it gives, at least for me, it gives me empathy for other people as I'm going through the process, because I have an inkling of what they're going through as I am asking them to do things,
Right.
So I feel like that's
and a sort of a bird's eye view of the whole process, an understanding of kind of what everybody needs from everybody else.
Yeah. So we are getting close to the end. I have one more question. It's mostly just like, what are some of the things you're excited about that are coming up down the pipeline for you?
For me?
Yeah. And also, what's your social security number? I knew I recognized you.
Well, like I said, I'm writing this pilot with these Irish people, and right now it's just a script for a pilot, but that's the process. Is you go, here's the script. Do you guys want to put money into producing the pilot? It's an animated show, so it would need to have a pilot, not a full order of episodes. So can we get more money to produce it? And once we do that, can we make it into a series? And that's been really exciting and really fun. I also have a live action pilot that I am writing and that I am hoping to actually shoot if I can get, this thing they call money to pay for shooting it. But I would like to do that myself and direct it myself. For the first time, I directed a short film last year, and I really enjoyed it. And it got into one festival out of the 400 I submitted to. So that was a fun process.
400 to 1. Some good odds.
It was even worse than the Spartans, Leonidas, their odds. Well, I guess there was 300 again.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it was the other way around. So that it's one of those things where it's an idea that's been brewing in my head for a long time, and it kind of comes and goes. And literally yesterday, I had a new insight into it, and I was like, oh, what if we did this? And it made me really excited about it again. So I'm hoping to do that maybe in the beginning of the new year. And then the other thing, and this is, just, I have not been I watched a clip the other day of Anthony Jeselnik talking about getting his first job writing for Jimmy Fallon. And he said when he got the job, people were like, congratulations, you could have been a great stand-up. And he was like, what are they talking about? And he was telling this to Colin Quinn. And he said, I came to you and I said, why are people saying, you know, you could have been a great stand-up? I'm still a stand-up. I'm still doing stand-up. I just have this other job. And people were like, well, once you become a writer, you get the money and you don't have the time and whatever. And he said to Colin Quinn, I said to you, you kept writing after you got you kept doing stand-up after you got writing jobs. And Colin Quinn, I guess he said the same thing Attell said, which was like, yeah, because I was terrible at my job. I didn't care about the writing stuff. And for me, once I started really getting into the writing, particularly the head writing stuff, I lost focus on doing stand-up. And so I'm really excited to start doing that again right now. I've been writing jokes for the first time in a long time and getting on stage, and it's just really, really fun. So that's exciting. And I was excited about the Powerball last night, but that didn't work out.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm always curious, about the process of stand-up, and I know we don't have that much time left because Chris has his questions he's got to ask. But when you were just going back a little bit, when you were doing more stand-up, did you find yourself writing jokes a lot more just throughout your day, like it would just come to you, or did you have to spend time like sitting down to write?
I never found, and I've gotten better about it later because I'm actually focusing on scripts. I never had the discipline to sit down and write jokes. That's what you're supposed to do, you know?
Yeah.
Drew Carey, write 10 jokes a day. Jerry Seinfeld talks about how he looked out the window when he was starting his stand-up career and he saw the construction crew across the street having lunch. And he was like, those guys have to go back to work. They just have to. They don't have a choice. And you have to look at writing that way. And I never had that discipline. I found, for me, the best place I ever wrote jokes was while I was at shows, just being in the mindset of like, this is what I want to talk about, and this is how I'm going to do it. And then I would go home and actually write stuff up. Again, because I've been doing it so long and I have started again, I feel like my process has shifted a little bit and become a little bit more, I'm just aware of everything. And I now carry, this is going to sound so dumb, but I never did it before. Now I have like a pad in my back pocket all the time, and I will immediately write down something if I think of it, and it will become a bit. It may not work ultimately, but at least I'm trying stuff on a regular basis, and being a little bit more disciplined about collecting that stuff. That's so much of, I think, what not just stand-up, but writing in general is about, figuring out what your process is and being disciplined about it,
Yeah, I wish I would have asked that question about that, about finding a process for yourself as a writer, because I write on occasion, and I try to write more, and I have the same sort of like notepad, but just on my phone. Anytime I have an idea for something, whether I'm listening to something else or whatever, I just stop everything. I take my phone out, write all the notes that I can down about it, and then sort of continue on with my day. And then it's just at least recorded so I can go back to it later. Having a process or understanding what works for you as an individual would be something I think it'd be interesting to know about. So if you can answer, yeah.
I think that's such a huge part of it. Like, I don't know. I keep going back to like, this is what I say to people. And I say this, and I don't do it myself, but I always say, like, at the beginning of the week, come up with 5 or 6 sessions you're going to write during, even if it's just an hour, even if it's just 45 minutes, different days, and then treat it like going to the dentist or going to the gym, and you're just going to show up at that time and you're going to sit there and whatever comes out, comes out. And if nothing comes out, that's okay. At least you just sat there, you know, because that does two things. One is it means you're in the mindset of writing all the time, and forcing yourself to show up means it just becomes a thing that you do on a regular basis. Like I said, just going to the gym, because it's so easy. It is so easy to just not write. It's the easiest thing in the world, you know? And it's much more difficult to sit down and go, okay, here I go.
Yeah.
But if you force yourself and just develop the muscle of like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be there and I'm going to be present and I'm going to do this, I think there's such a huge payoff to that, because like going to the gym, it's all about consistency, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I've heard about the gym. I don't know myself.
Yeah. It's funny. It's been a running theme in at least my life for the past, few months, is, things that are fast are not real, things that take a long time and that are slow are the things that are probably worth going after. So I appreciate you giving us like all the knowledge that you have. I mean, you haven't given us all the knowledge. I tried, but you just wouldn't give it up. But
Are you familiar with Newton's second law?
Newton's second law?
Next time I come on, we'll talk about that.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. That's not the apple.
No, that's not the I don't
Okay.
know. I don't actually know what I'm talking about.
Neither do I. None of us really do. I mean, it's mostly we like to hear mouth opens.
I used to teach junior high school science, so I pretend I know how to talk about that stuff, but we never got up to Newton's second law. Come on.
Just one lesson ahead of the kid.
Yeah, pretty much.
Always.
If that.
All right, so I know we're running out of time. Chris, you have your very special question.
Yes. If you had one piece of advice to give someone listening to this podcast who's an aspiring writer, what would that one piece of advice be?
Persist. That's it. It goes back to what we were talking about before about control what you can control. All you can control is I'm going to keep going, and it might take a long time, but keep going. Also, sharpen your pencils.
Helpful.
Very hard to read blurry pencil writing.
Love it. Perfect. Amazing.
Always have to undercut the serious stuff with a joke. Why would you do that?
No. It's
not cool.
That's what we want.
Not cool.
See, but it always makes it 10 times better / worse as if right after there's just a little extra long beat of silence.
Well, that's the best. When you're doing comedy and there's silence, it means you're doing it right, Yeah,
you're doing it right. You keep going. Persist. For the people at home who want to connect with you or sort of see what's going on in your life, where can they reach you or see your stuff?
I would say best thing is either I'll give you three options. One is my website, which is just SeanConroy.com. And there is you can email me from there. Another is I'm on TikTok at Sean Conroy Write, WRITE. And Instagram is just at Sean Conroy. So any of those, I'm pretty. This is why I don't write notes on my phone, because as soon as I go on my phone, I'm checking my Instagram. I'm checking my, That's why I use an actual pad, but because I have no discipline like that. But anyway, those are the places I would say people can reach me. So
awesome,
cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Also, my phone number is 666. So
Yep. We knew that. We could tell. Thank you so much for being on the show with us, and
thank you for having me. This was I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yes, it was a blast. Thank you.
I wish Mina was taller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. All right, bye.
That's That's a wrap on today's Lot1 Podcast episode. Thank you so much to our guest, Sean Conroy. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Huge thanks to our producer, Mina Vazarian. You're a gentleman and a scholar. And shout out to today's sponsor, Saturation.io, who makes budgeting a lot easier. Make sure to check us out on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot1 Podcast. That is THELOT number 1 PODCAST. And also check us out on Lot1Productions.com to see all the fun stuff we got going on. Film lingo of the day is
Crew call.
crew call. Now, crew call is the time that all of the crew is supposed to be at the location in the morning or at
The
night.
time of day or night shooting is scheduled to begin for the day. That is false. Your definition is false. That is false. Crew call is the time of day or night which shooting is which you are scheduled as the crew to show up for filming, because the crew has to be there for the shoot to start. Yeah, that's what it's for.
Chris is a little bit bitter, but it's okay. We'll move on. All right, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Greg,
Your definition is really bad, Deji. I'm
I think
just
I got
reading
it
your
from-
definition.
I think I
Crew
got it
call.
from,
The time of day shooting is scheduled to begin for the day. Shooting does not start when crew call. I just want you to think about that one.
crew call. The time of day. That
It's not when shooting is scheduled to begin.
The beginning of the day of the shooting of the day. The beginning of crew call. The day of the beginning of shooting of the.
All right, bye.